Welcome to this edition of Labor Vision. I'm Bob Delaney, Executive Director of the Institute for Labor Studies and Research. Labor Vision, a production of the Institute, focuses on topics of importance to working Rhode Island families. We hope you enjoy this evening's edition.
Good evening and welcome to this edition of Labor Vision. I'm Jim Riley. I'll be your host tonight. Tonight, my guests, I'm just delighted to have them here, are Tim Melia, President of UFCW Local 328, and Sam Marvin, Organizer Local 328. Please don't boo. My career began with this union. Back in the early 70s in Connecticut, I was an apprentice meat cutter and rose up through the ranks. And in 1984, I left the meat room and became an international rep for the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, traveled around the country for 15 or 16 years, organizing workers all over the country. And then in 1997, I made myself a free agent and came to Local 328 about 2 months after this fellow right here came to Local 328. So Tim and I basically started around the same time. I was the director of organizing. I was delighted to have him as an organizer, and we got to spend some time working together. And then he went on to become a business agent, and then secretary treasurer, and then president of the local union. You actually skipped secretary treasurer.
I did. I was the executive assistant, then went to the president.
And Sam, great to have you here today. I remember the first time I met you, I was going around. Remember, we were looking for some young people to bring into the local, and I'm out on the Cape, and I'm out at a store out there, and I'm walking into the store, and I see this car in the employees' parking lot just loaded with all kinds of really progressive, liberal kind of bumper stickers. It's just wallpaper. That I'm thinking, boy, I'd like to see who that guy is. And I go in, and Bob Serrato, business agent, is there. I said, Bob, who's that? He says, oh yeah, that's Sam Marvin. He works over at the bakery. We went over, we had a conversation, introduced you to Tim, and got you moving. And now you're just one of the top organizers in the state. And we're really, really proud of the work that you're doing.
He was a great find. He was a great find.
Thank you, Jimmy. So. Some of our viewers may not know that much about the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. A lot of people are members of the union. But tell us something about the union, membership, anything you can think of.
It goes back to 1937, I believe. Sam DeSano and another gentleman, my name is Crawley, decided they wanted a union in their workplace because the First National in Boston, which they worked for, as well had a union, and they didn't. So they went to the company and they said, we want to form a union, and the company refused them. So Sam DeSano said very prophetically is that we are going to form a union in Rhode Island, and he did. And it became Local 328 of the Amalgamated Meat Cutters and Butcher Workmen of North America.
And I understand that Governor Gene Raimondo's grandfather was a meat cutter for First National at the time, and it was the Italian meat cutters that started the union, so we can thank her for that.
He was one of the founding members.
It's a great legacy.
Yes,
Go on.
And so they grew the local through the years, and Sam went on to become the Director of Labor in the state of Rhode Island for many years, but I'm the 12th president of in the great history of this local union. Just became president 2 years ago. We represent about 11,000 employees in different industries, from retail food, cafeteria workers, bus drivers, people in banking, in food processing and other industries such as that. We have 25 contracts with 17 different companies right now, so we're very busy and we continue to organize as well.
Terrific. So kind of like the nature of the union is you have a president, you've got Dominic Pontarelli, who a lot of people know is your secretary treasurer. We have servicing agents who, everybody has a contract, and the servicing agents go out to the workplaces and visit them on a regular basis. And we also have my favorite department, which is the organizing department. I did organizing most of my career. I think it's the most important thing that we do. And I also think it's the most fun that we do. You can really make organizing fun. And as I mentioned earlier, it was great to bring you in some years ago. You've been having a great career so far. Tell us about your career so far as a terrific organizer for United Food and Commercial Workers Union.
Yes, so I began my work here at the local in 2013. And so the first election we actually had was with a group of salespeople at Bob's Discount Furniture in Attleboro. And so we spoke to those workers because Bain Capital had just bought a majority share in that company. And those are workers who are really concerned about losing their benefits. And as you know, one of the best benefits you have as a union member is a protected contract that guarantees and protects your benefits. So we organized around that issue. And we won that election 13-4, and we went into negotiations. And so they now have a contract, and they're protected in those benefits. Since then, we've negotiated many other places. As Tim mentioned, we do organize workers from a lot of different sort of backgrounds. So we won a campaign in New Bedford for tire recycling. We won that 65-5 for a company called Bob's Tire. We won a union election for Eastland Foods, which is a company that processes fruits and vegetables in Rhode Island here in Cranston. And we also organized a group of bus drivers in Bourne. And we also organized a group of truck drivers out in Taunton who deliver pet food across the region.
I believe we also have some. I remember when I first came to the local 97, we started an organizing campaign down in Fall River and organized a nursing home down there that's still under contract. I understand you also organized a nursing home.
Yes, yeah. Actually in November of 2016 we organized a nursing home, and it's called Summit Commons in Providence, and there's about 103 CNAs, housekeeping, dietary workers there. So we won that election, and we also actually won a card check at a company called Oak Hill in Pawtucket as well.
Lots of different groups that yes. A very eclectic membership, I might say. So, in order to get from organizing to contract to servicing, it's a tough road sometimes in negotiations. And I understand you've been having some tough times in negotiations regarding a couple of wins that the organizing department had.
Correct.
Tim.
It is. It's getting harder and harder. These companies are taking a position now where they're dragging the process out because under the rules of the National Labor Relations Board, when you organize a new unit, you have a 1-year period to get that first contract. After that 1-year period expires, the folks inside or the company can start a decertification campaign to try to get rid of the union. So you kind of are under time constraints to try to get that first contract. And we're finding more and more companies are dragging this process out, trying to frustrate the workers in the plants, trying to create problems that were never there before, and try to make issues that the union's not doing what they're supposed to do by not getting them a contract. So it's becoming harder and harder and harder to get to that first contract.
That's tough. You know, I'd like to see, I remember we had the Employee Free Choice Act some years ago, and it didn't pass. But I would like to see one of those tenets come back. And we may have to wait until we take over this, the legislature in Washington. Before we do that, I'm confident that that's going to happen. But I would, if workers organize, go through the process legally, have legitimate issues, and win an organizing campaign, then they ought to be able, within a reasonable amount of time, get a contract. What good is it to have a National Labor Relations Act if there's nothing in there that compels the employer to get the job done? And that's the problem that we're having now.
And the board is so overwhelmed at times with you can file charges against them when they do drag their feet, but the board is so overwhelmed with so many other cases, and they're understaffed, that it takes such a long time to get either a hearing for this issue or to get a decision from the board one way or the other on your charges. So it can drag out the process for years.
Well, it has been dragging out over at Bob's Tires, hasn't it, Sam?
Yeah, absolutely. At Bob's Tire and a couple of our other contracts as well. You know, the election process is so difficult. You know, to go through an election, to get a majority support, and to win that election day is so difficult. But like you guys are talking about, that negotiating process is just as difficult, if not more. And the day after the election, you know, the workers who vote yes, they're feeling great, right? They just won their election. But that same day, the employer's going around patting their workers on the back saying, don't worry, we got this, we got this. They have a strategy. Because they know that once workers get their contract, then it's very difficult for them to go backwards, right? Workers end up coming back together and say, you know what, this is actually pretty good. Okay. So it's very difficult once workers have a contract for the employer to try to get the union out.
Well, my favorite local union in Rhode Island made the 100th issue of Common Ground today.
That's great.
Top fold, top. Eastland workers stage one-day strike. I understand it. You give us just for a moment. Tell us what happened over there.
This is a perfect example of what we were just talking about, that an employer who'd been dragging out the process, and it was taking quite a long time to get to a contract. We've been going over a year and a half in negotiations with this employer. He was refusing to give any type of wage increases or any type of something that would actually benefit these people.
Yeah.
So we told him, we warned him that you're going to make me do something that I really don't want to do, and he wasn't listening. So we proved our point. We took him on a one-day strike. Those folks did great. They were together. They all walked out together and walked the picket line. Very few people crossed back into work and crossed that picket line. And since then, I got to admit that things have been moving much better in negotiations.
Sometimes
I'm cautiously optimistic.
Sometimes you got to take them out to the corn crib.
You do.
Sometimes you got to take them out to the corn crib. The one thing that I really, really loved about Local 328 is, you know, look, we organize workers, we service our members, we do lots and lots of things to keep our members happy and to keep them involved and to keep them educated, new member orientation meetings, things like that. But one thing that Local 328 does than any other local union in the state of Rhode Island is what you do for the community, what you do for charity. It is absolutely amazing. Tell us about it.
We do a lot of philanthropic work for our members and for the community as well. We have a fund that we developed a few years ago. It's called the Help a Friend Fund, where you may have somebody who has fallen on hard times, or you know, has a fire in their house and lost everything. Well, we have a fund where we can donate money to them and help them get back on their feet. We have that, but we also have at Christmas time we gather toys for the kids of members who kids may not have otherwise have a good Christmas, so we donate toys to these folks. At Thanksgiving,
let me go to the toy thing just for a moment. I was involved in this. It's absolutely wonderful. We have a closet, a big closet. We used to have a stage at a local union. We closed it off in the closet. It's loaded with racks and racks and racks of toys for these kids, and we all get together and bag them up. It's beautiful. What else have we got?
And just to say that it's in the toys that we get are all donated. They're all donated by our stewards, our members, that they want to help fellow members. It's the members helping members. That's the best part of that. And besides the toy drive, we have a food drive every year. We raise money and we collect food so at Thanksgiving, people again who may not have a nice Thanksgiving dinner, we send them a basket full of food that they can have a great Thanksgiving meal with a gift card. They can go out buy a turkey from Stop and Shop with it as well. So we help them out as well.
The Leukemia and Lymphoma Society knows that United Food and Commercial Workers Local 328 are leukemia fighters. That's a big story. Tell us about it.
Well, and you've been a great part of this, Jimmy, over the years, and it's a great testament to the work you've done on helping raise money for this great cause. We've raised over $1 million over the 21 years that we've been doing this in our golf tournament. It truly is, and it's again, the members come out, the corporate sponsors help us out and donate money to this, and all 100% of the proceeds from this golf tournament that we collect goes to the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society for research. It's earmarked exclusively for research.
Can that be used for a junket here or something where one of the big shots wants to go somewhere? Earmarked strictly for research hospitals and for doctors who specialize in leukemia and blood-borne diseases. Sam, I know that you guys, I mean, the whole staff gets involved in these programs. You know, it's wonderful that labor unions, and you know, the laborers do this, and the NEA with the Gingerbread Express, we do so much good. And so, but you know, the media doesn't talk about that. They don't hear about that. Unless it's bleeding or burning, they don't want to hear about it. But the labor movements do an awful lot of good for not only their membership, but for other folks too. And I'm just proud of that, proud of the work that you guys do, and proud that they do too. And on that note, that's it for this edition of Labor Vision. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
Welcome to this edition of Labor Vision. I'm your host, Bob Delaney. One of the biggest concerns that we hear from people when they're getting near the age of retirement are their concerns and questions about the issue of their health care when and after they retire. So we're going to dedicate this information session to that, and if necessary, we'll continue in another show. But for this segment, our guest is Bob Dumais. Bob is a principal for Legacy Benefit Advisors. His group works with retired individuals to try and help them build a foundation which will give them security in their health as they move through their retirement years. Welcome to the show, Bob.
Thank you.
One of the biggest concerns that people really have is they talk about Medicare, but they don't really understand what it is. Based upon the kind of questions that you've been given over the years and the information you have, let's describe what is Medicare.
Medicare is essentially coverage provided by the government when somebody turns 65, but it's also available if someone's got a long-term health issue. If they've been disabled for a couple of years, they're eligible for Medicare. If someone's got some kind of permanent kidney issue, they're eligible for Medicare. But Medicare is pretty broad. When people come in and say they're going on Medicare, we always kind of chuckle a little bit because it's kind of like saying I'm going to go out and buy a car. I mean, there's so many variations when you buy a car, so many brands and styles of cars, big, small, and so there's lots and lots of options. So when we're talking to people about Medicare, we ask a whole lot of questions to try to dial them into something that makes sense for them, because there's lots of options. You have original, traditional Medicare, and there you're picking components and you're building a healthcare plan. And the opposite side of that is a Med Advantage plan, where you're essentially telling the government that you've chosen not to take their health care coverage, but you've instead chosen a private insurance carrier. In Rhode Island, that's going to be United Healthcare or it's going to be Blue Cross. So you would pick from the choices they have available, and that's quite a few. Rhode Island Blue Cross has got 7, United Healthcare's got 3. But if you go that route, you pick one of those, the government, instead of providing you health coverage, they will pay a premium on your behalf to the carrier that you've selected.
Let me ask you a question. Is everybody in Rhode Island eligible for Medicare?
To be eligible for Medicare, you either have to be a U.S. citizen or be a permanent resident in this country. So you can be eligible for Medicare. It doesn't mean that we're going to buy it in the same way. In other words, traditional Medicare is made up of components. You have Part A, Part B, Part C, and Part D. Part A is the basic hospital component. In order to get Part A for free, you have to have 40 quarters. So they tie into the 40 quarters that you hear people talk about with Social Security.
So the quarters are the period in which you were employed.
Right, 40 working quarters. If you have 40 quarters, then you are eligible for Part A. In Rhode Island, you have some municipalities that don't participate with Social Security. So if someone spends their entire working career working for one of these municipalities, it's conceivable that they could reach retirement age and not have their 40 quarters. So if you don't have your quarters, that means you won't get your Part A for free. You'll have to buy it. So if you get it for free, free is great. If you have to buy it, it's over $400 a month to buy Part A. Okay?
And the coverage that you would get for $400 a month would be similar to or equal to what you would get for free had you had your 40 quarters.
Yes. Yes. Now, there's some other conditions. If you don't have your 40 quarters, but you're married and your spouse has 40 quarters, you can piggyback on your spouse. If you're not married and your ex-spouse has 40 quarters, you can still piggyback on your ex-spouse to get credit for those quarters. So, once you have your Part A, the next thing you have to do is get Part B. So Part A is essentially hospital coverage. Part B is essentially medical coverage. So Part B, everybody has to buy. Part B is somewhere $130, $140 a month.
And what does that cover?
That's essentially your medical coverage. So it would cover the fee for office visits, fee for surgery, any kind of testing, MRIs, lab works, all that kind of stuff. It's all rolled up into Part B. Now, when you put A and B together, you're left with a skeleton of a healthcare plan, if you will. You have lots of deductibles, you have lots of co-pays, and you have no drug coverage yet. So to make that a comprehensive plan, you have to add Part D. Now, Part D is a drug rider. In Rhode Island right now, I believe there's 24 or 25 different Part D riders that you could pick up. So when we're meeting with people, we typically, find out what medications they're taking, what dosages, the frequency. We plug all that in, and it gives us the best Part D option for that person on that date.
So on Part D, it would vary by individual depending upon what medication you may be on for the rest of your life, what medication you can expect to be on, cold and flu season, a whole pile of factors would come into that Part D.
Right, and the best we can do is make a decision based upon that point in time. I mean, our healthcare is fragile. We could become very ill tomorrow and we were fine today. But we make the best decision for them at the time. So now you've got A and B and D, you have a drug program. You still have a lot of exposure. So now the next step is to get a supplement. In Rhode Island, there's lots of carriers that offer supplements. The government, in their infinite wisdom, actually put together 10 different supplement models. And the carriers that want to work in that space, their supplement models are dialed in. For example, Blue Cross might have a Plan F and a Plan A, and United might have an F and a D. So the carriers can choose which ones they want to fall into, and depending on which one they fall into, that determines the level of exposure that they're going to take from you.
But it's important that there's a differentiation that people hear about being Part A, Part B, Part D, and then filling those gaps with a plan. And sometimes those letters are the same, because you can have a Plan A, you had a Part A over here.
Right. The
plans fill in the gaps in the parts that you had.
Exactly.
And it's important that you recognize that you can get several of the plans from different providers, and what you do is line up the plans and compare them to the individual to ensure that they're making the best selection for them.
Exactly. And a Plan F from Blue Cross is essentially the same as a Plan F from United Healthcare or from Bankers Life, but yet the pricing can differ significantly. So United's Plan F is about $130 plus or minus. Blue Cross is about $140. A gentleman I know is on Bankers Life Plan F. He's paying about $220. So he's paying a lot more for no better coverage. And while we'd love to help this gentleman and move him into a more cost-effective Plan F, there's reasons why he can't do that. So it's not always easy to move from the plan you're on to something else.
Now, is there a time each year that people can move from one plan to a next because the prices have changed from company to company on that plan?
Yes and no. So there is an open enrollment period, which runs from October 15th through December 7th. You know when it's that time of year, because the TV commercials are all from the different companies offering supplements and that. During that time frame, if you're a Rhode Island resident, you can make some changes. There are limitations on the changes that you can make. So if you're moving from so we didn't talk much about the Part C, but if you choose not to take traditional original Medicare, the other alternative that you have is you can pick a private insurance carrier instead of the government to provide your coverage. In Rhode Island, the choices you have are Blue Cross of Rhode Island or United Healthcare. Blue Cross has got 7 plans in that space. United has 3. If you decide to go that route, the coverage is very different. You're essentially telling the government that you no longer want them to provide you health insurance. You've chosen a carrier and you've chosen a plan, and you would like the government, instead of giving you coverage, to pay a premium to the carrier you've chosen to offset the cost of the plan you've chosen there.
So your development of quarters, which would make you eligible for Medicare, you make the decision that you don't want to be in the Medicare program, that you're going to ask those contributions be made on your behalf into one of these other programs.
Exactly.
Is there portability from state to state in those plans? Or are you limited to the state that you live in? Or can you move it? For example, somebody in Rhode Island goes to live in Florida for 4 months of the year. Can they simply take that plan? Do they have to buy a plan that accommodates that change?
That's a lot of questions all rolled up into one. I will say the rules the rules vary state by state. So Rhode Island rules are very different than Mass rules. We tell people, you know, if you're talking to your friend who lives over the border, forget it. Don't just listen to them because the rules are different. So if we get back to open enrollment, so during that open enrollment period, you can make some changes. If you start out making a more conservative approach with traditional Medicare, you can always move to a Med Advantage plan during open enrollment. If you start with a Med Advantage plan and you want to move toward the more traditional side, in Rhode Island, you've got health questions you have to answer. And depending on your ability to answer those, the way the carrier wants to hear them answered may impact your ability to be able to move. You may be stuck in the Med Advantage world. In the Med Advantage world, there's lots of different variations out there. Some of them give you more flexibility to spend extended periods out of state. Others don't give you the flexibility. If you move to another state permanently, that typically creates another opportunity when you're essentially starting from scratch and you can pick what you want. So
if you relocate it to Florida as opposed to just being in Rhode Island?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. It's different. It's different. And when we meet with people, the model that we've built, we talk with people about their health, their lifestyle, and their budget. So the number of choices you have is vast. So we would sit with you and say, Bob, tell us about your health. You know, you're a pretty healthy guy. Are you getting any ongoing medical care right now? Are you taking any prescription drugs? Where do you get your care right now? And then we'll ask some harder questions. Bob, if you got a real serious diagnosis tomorrow, would you want the ability to leave Rhode Island? Or are you totally comfortable with the healthcare system in Rhode Island? So that's where we start. And then we move into lifestyle. Are you going to spend the whole year in Rhode Island? Are you going to spend part of the year in Florida? How long is that stay going to be? And then lastly, it's your budget. I mean, we can put you in plans as high as $400 total cost to plans as low as $0 a month once you pay your Part B.
Well, you can see how complicated this really is. And I think that it's important for us to come back to talk about those very clear decisions that have to be made when you're talking to people about health style or lifestyle, health, and budget. So we'll come back in part 2. We'll talk about those things. We'll talk about people living in Massachusetts, getting services in Massachusetts, moving to Florida. This is a very complicated piece, and it deserves another section. So we're hoping you'll come back. We'll do a part 2. Thank you for watching this version of Labor Vision. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision. We appreciate your input and encourage your comments. Labor Vision can be seen on this channel 3 times each week: Tuesday at 7 p.m., Thursday at 8 p.m., and Saturday at 5 p.m.